Welcome to the round three recap from the Reykjavik Open. It's been a very long day of chess. The first game I played today started at 9 a.m. It was 5 hours. See the previous recap video if you want to see all my thoughts about that game. But this is round three. I was playing Tim Jaksland from Denmark. Older player, FM. I found a decent number of his games. And actually, before the game, I wasn't sure what to expect the first move. We can see he played e4, but I was half expecting knight f3. But he played e4, and if you saw the previous recap, you'll know that maybe I was a little bit disappointed, a little bit tilted afterwards, and I was really, really tempted to go for a Stafford Gambit in this game. But I resisted and I played a more normal Sicilian. And my opponent actually surprised me here because I've seen in the past he's played knight c3 and knight f3, but here he played pawn c3, the Alapin Sicilian, also known as the c3 Sicilian. And this is an opening that I've encountered over the years. And I actually encountered the same opening last year against none other than Grandmaster Adiban. It was a second round of the 2022 Reykjavik Open. And Adiban actually played a really nice game. I'm pretty sure the recap is somewhere on my YouTube channel. If I find the link, I'll link it below. But this game actually followed the same line in the Adiban game for a while. Now, I should explain the point of pawn d5, and this is one of the main lines, is after takes, because white has played pawn c3, the knight can't develop to c3. So this is essentially justified for black to develop the queen, and it takes time for white to actually remove the queen from d5. And we follow a main line, d4, knight f6, knight f3, pawn e6, and then he plays this move knight to a3, which I believe is kind of the trend these days for Alapin players. Knight a3 looks a bit unusual at first, but the idea is to eventually play knight b5 and try and cause some mayhem on the queen side. So this is still prep. I play knight c6, and then bishop to e3. And this is one of two main lines. I think the more common line is knight b5 right away, after which queen d8, takes, I believe is known to be very close to equal, and black should be doing fine here. But bishop e3 is a move I encountered last year. And last year, I didn't really know the opening so well. And thankfully, after I lost to Adiban last year, I reviewed the opening. And even though it was a year ago, I still remembered the improvement from that game. So I started with taking, and after knight to b5, queen d8, knight takes d4. This is a position I had against Adiban, and last year I made the mistake of taking on d4, which just led to a bit more pleasant position for white. I just got completely outplayed. But this time around, I remembered the move. It's not to take on d4, but rather to pressure the bishop on e3 and start with a move knight to d5. And at first, it looks like this move makes a concession because it allows white to take on c6, which my opponent does, and after pawn takes, I am left with these separated pawns. But at the same time, I'm hitting the bishop, so I have a bit of initiative, and I get some pretty active piece play. After he plays bishop d2, I played queen to b6, and I'll admit I was out of my prep here. Like, the main improvement I remembered was knight d5. Queen b6 I came up with as kind of a natural follow-up, not only hitting b2, but also preparing bishop c5 to create the battery. And actually, when I played queen b6, I was calculating a funny mating idea. If white plays c4 here, attempting to remove the knight, I would play bishop c5 and say, "Oh no, my knight! Someone call an ambulance." But not for me, because bishop a6 would be checkmate. So I thought this was a cool mating pattern. White would, of course, have to play a move like queen e2, and then, yeah, then the queen and bishop are kind of in each other's way. So I would be happy there. So my opponent took, I think, And we can see from the timestamps, like we both played the opening pretty quickly, but after about 7 minutes, my opponent played queen to b3, simply offering the queen trade. And instead of taking right away, which would actually improve white's structure and open the a file, I played a move which provoked white to take on b6, move bishop c5, hitting f2, and after it takes, I take with pawn, and I was happy to fix the structure, have the a file, have my pawns reunited. And yeah, from here, it's a more positional queenless middle game. It's not the same sort of tactical slugfest that we saw in my previous game, but I was happy to just get a more quiet game where there's less fireworks, and it was a position that was actually very pleasant to play. Now, there's a few things I do want to note. During the game, I was really tired, and I made the terrible mistake of not having any tea or coffee, and I was yawning so much, and I felt bad. I was trying to hide it. And sitting next to me, maybe I'll share a picture. There's a picture on Twitter. Sitting on my left was Simon Williams. Sitting on my right was Dina Balankaya. And they were both streaming, and the cameras were capturing all directions. So I hope that I didn't offend the online viewers. But the good thing was it was very sunny. Like we were next to a big window and the sun was shining. I think the sunlight helped reduce the melatonin in my system. So anyway, back to the game. Bishop e2. I play pawn f6, violating the Ben Feingold rule. But I figured pawn f6 was actually a nice move because I want to play pawn e5. At the same time, I'm restricting the knight, and I want to just have a happy place for this bishop. And one thing I'll say, I don't want to give like too much away about what's going to happen, but starting with pawn f6, pretty much every single move I make for the rest of the game until it gets tactical is a simple improving move. So if we just watch black's moves, every single move improves the position or the setup in some way. White castles, I expand in the center. Of course, I had to save my bishop. White was also attempting to improve, so I complete development. Pawn a4, king f7, connecting my rooks, trying to get my h8 rook into play. Rook b1, rook d8, pawn g3. And yeah, from here, my pieces look relatively optimized. And now it's a matter of trying to figure out a plan. Now, g3 was a useful move from white because he's preventing knight f4, which was an idea when I played rook d8. I had actually intentions of playing knight f4 and knight d3 combined with bishop f5, really hammering away at this weak square in white's territory. But after pawn g3, I decided to play pawn c5, which is an interesting way to make progress, trying to activate the bishop. And after the trade on c5, my bishop finds a happy place on the diagonal. And if we look at white's pieces, they're relatively restricted, especially compared to my pieces, which are a bit more active and centralized. Like the knight is completely restricted by my pawn structure. This bishop doesn't have a great square because the pawn chain just takes away most of the squares. e3 is off limits. So I was feeling pretty good just with the square control in the position. And after bishop to e1, it was a very sad square for the white bishop. And I just keep improving. I gain space on the king side, pawn g5. Ideas of pawn g4, questioning the purpose of the knight. He starts with rook c1. I advance, knight d2, and then pawn f5. So preventing knight e4. And yeah, I had ideas of like playing pawn f4. I was also fantasizing about lines where I play h5, h4, take, rook h8, knight f4, sack a knight, bishop d5, and then checkmate on h1. Even though queens are off the board, it still seemed like a fun position to attack on the king side. So here my opponent played bishop to b5, and I played pawn h5, so continuing with this pawn storm idea. And then knight c4 was played, hitting the pawn on e5. Now, I didn't want to advance the pawn because this would allow the knight to kind of come in and be annoying a little bit. So instead, I defend with the king. And in this position, my opponent took a few minutes to think, and I was anticipating a really cool tactical idea. Now, My opponent didn't play the move I was hoping he would play, but I do want to show it because there's a really unusual and really kind of beautiful aesthetic tactic that you don't see every day. I was anticipating bishop to d2, which looks like a normal move at first, maybe ideas of bishop to e3 to try and get some trades. But after bishop d2, there's a really, really nice move for black. And I'll give this as a tactical quiz for the viewers. If you want to pause the video and find the cool tactic for black, feel free to do so. But the move is combining a lot of different tactics in one, is knight to c7. This is a double discovery, unleashing not only the bishop, but also the rook, and it's combining multiple ideas of removing the guard. I'm threatening to remove the guard of the knight. The bishop's defending the knight, so I want to take the bishop and win a piece, but I also want to take the knight and win the bishop on d2. And when I saw this, I was just kind of getting jittery because I was hoping this would happen. Just such a weird retreating move with the knight, but white has no defense here as far as I can see. But instead, my opponent played a move which I wasn't anticipating, pawn to a5. And I thought for a little bit, and very quickly I realized I have the same tactical idea. Even though the bishop's not on d2 as a target, I still have this resource, knight c7. And now that the bishop is undefended, white's position is just crumbling because the bishop, it's tied down to defending the knight, and it can't really stay defending the knight. If rook b1, I would take, and take. So at this point, white is in big trouble. My opponent used most of his remaining time. I think thought for, yeah, we see the clock went from 14 minutes all the way down to under a minute. Eventually played bishop c6, but my opponent was just realizing that his position is lost, and I went ahead and grabbed the knight. After takes, I took with the knight on a8, figured it's nice to keep the rook on the file, and if takes, I can always take and redevelop the knight. He played pawn a6, and then I played pawn b5, just solidifying the bishop on c4, and the two minor pieces are just so much more powerful than the rook in this position. So we played a few more moves, rook d1, bishop d3, bishop d2, and here I was trying to figure out the most precise way to convert, and I decided to play a tricky move. Now, at first, it looks like there is a tactic, bishop e2 or bishop c2, but this would actually be a blunder due to bishop g5, and then I'm losing my rook on d8. So I decided to start with a nice move, pawn to f4, simply obstructing the potential for bishop to g5, and after he took, then I play bishop e2, and after takes, I don't take back with king because it still allows bishop f4 check, but rather play king e6. The dark square bishop can't check my king on the light square. And then he played rook b1. I took the bishop and he resigned. Yeah, that was round 3. It was probably my quickest game of the tournament. And I think overall it was a pretty smooth game. And I was satisfied to have won this game without too much trouble. Especially like after the opening, I got exactly what I wanted, just a kind of easy queenless middle game, made a lot of improving moves. So this is sometimes a nice strategy to just gradually improve, keep applying pressure, not forcing matters, but just being patient and waiting for the tactical opportunity. Worked nicely in this game. So this puts me at 2 out of 3. Now I'm recording this very late at night. It's still March 30th. It's 11:50 p.m. March 31st is 10 minutes away in Iceland, so I should probably get some sleep. And yeah, I might be a little bit behind with upload schedule, but at least at the time of this recording, I will be playing round 4 in about 14 hours, 15 hours from now. Pairings are actually up, so I should probably prepare. I'm playing Gregory Markson from the USA. He's 70-something years old, so it should be interesting. So stay tuned for the next one, and now it's time to sleep.